Hello everyone, my name's Zach. I'm just making this video to kind of capture some of my thoughts about my undergraduate psychology degree. I know it's a pretty popular thing to study and there's lots of different videos on YouTube talking about kind of people's experience, so I just thought I would kind of add my own if anyone's interested. The main reason I'm making this video is that I think studying psychology or studying anything in general is a really tough decision to make in people's lives, and I think the more different opinions you hear from different types of people, the easier it is to kind of make that decision for yourself. So I hope this kind of helps anybody who's kind of maybe mulling over whether psychology is for them or just wanting to learn more about the process in Australia. I hope you get something out of this. I'll also add in some of my just personal opinions and everything like that. And as I'm just one person, just take that with a huge grain of salt. I know lots of people who study psych and really love it. And some people it's more of a stepping stone into other things. So everything I talk about kind of just comes from my own personal perspective, and it doesn't really need to be taken that seriously in the end. Another reason I'm making this video is that I just hope my experience helps shed some light on what it's actually like to study psychology in Australia. I think especially for young people, maybe VCE students or people looking to kind of pivot their career, they kind of have this idea of what psychology is in their heads, and that doesn't really line up always 100% to what it's actually like kind of moving through the pathway of studying psychology in Australia. So for those who don't know, in Australia there is a very strict pathway to become a psychologist. So just like an architect, it's a protected term, so you can't just call yourself a psychologist. You have to have a very specific list of qualifications and degrees. And there's a bit of nuance and a couple of different pathways, but the main way people become psychologists is that they do a 3-year undergraduate degree, and then you do an honours year, which is kind of like an extra year on your undergrad, and then you do a Masters of Clinical Psychology or Masters of Clinical Neuropsych, but just clinical is probably the most popular one, and I think most people who are interested in psychology move through the pathway thinking, yep, I'm going to become a clinical psychologist, I'm going to do minimum 6 years of study to get there. So that's how it kind of works generally. But in terms of how far I just finished my 3rd year undergraduate degree. I really kind of enjoy studying. I'm a bit of a big dork, so I really like learning new things and studying. So I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on, which I'll get into a little bit later in the video, but that's where I'm at the moment. I did get into honours. I got accepted into honours program at my university, but I decided to decline that offer for now. So again, everything I talk about in the future, obviously I can't speak of what it's like to study clinical psychology in a more advanced way, but I hope this video kind of is informative to people who are just thinking about taking that first step into doing that undergrad or something like that. So in terms of a general review of my experience and how my general course went, I'll talk about a few things that I really enjoyed, and I'll just talk about the general culture and expectations of the course that I did. So just for context, I did my course at a university in the city. I won't say exactly which one, but there's not that many different ones. So again, this kind of what I talk about might not be reflected in all universities, but from what I've talked about from different people, I think it's very similar across all of Australia, especially because the core subjects that you have to do are pretty much the same no matter where you go. So the first thing I'll talk about is the tutors that I had. I had some amazing tutors at my university. I'm so grateful for some of the tutors and teachers that I had. Not all of them were good. A lot of them were kind of very stressed out uni students who were doing their PhDs or masters, and you can kind of tell they weren't really the most passionate teachers, or they weren't really that into becoming a good teacher. You could tell they were just doing this to earn money whilst they were doing their PhD. Whilst some other ones that I had were absolutely fantastic teachers. I think it's amazing the difference you can tell between people who are passionate about teaching and learning and those who are just there to kind of get paid and move up the ranks of being an academic pretty much. So I had one tutor for my social psychology class who just was absolutely amazing, and I was very lucky to have her twice in my first year and second year. So that was just amazing, and just like the effort she put into like learning with students. Most classes that I would go to, it starts off really full, and then you get to like week 6, 7, 8 of the semester, and all the classes start to drop off. With her class, it was full pretty much to the very end, which is extremely rare in like modern universities if you think about how many people study online. So in that, I think it's just a bit of a mixed bag, depending on the uni, depending on the situation, what year you're in. Some tutors are going to be amazing, some are going to just be kind of there pretty much just to like fulfill their requirements. But I think that's pretty normal no matter what you study, to be honest. So, but I think that wasn't really a deal breaker for me. Anyway, so the next thing I'll talk about is the coursework. With the coursework, I really enjoyed, as I said, I'm someone who really loves to learn and really loves like kind of nerding out on different white papers and stuff like that. So the coursework that we did was, I would say, very interesting. Although it's the same kind of no matter what uni you go to, I thought the uni that I went to made a really good effort to kind of have modern coursework and kind of always updating it. And one of the things that I love the most about studying psychology is that the projects and the lab reports and the things that you work on are often taken from the academics' own work. So we had a lot of opportunities to kind of learn how to do a basic lab report, but we were doing it about content that the academics themselves were actually working on at the moment, like really interesting things about the brain and behavior. And I think for me, the most interesting stuff that I got from my psychology degree leaned towards more that kind of neuropsychology, neuroscience side of things, rather than the kind of behavior and therapy side of things as well. Another thing I'll talk about in terms of how the undergraduate works is that there's definitely a culture of pressure to move up the ranks, pressure to get into honours that I experienced whilst I was studying. I know this is a very common experience for a lot of people, but the way it works is that you do your undergraduate and you have 8 core subjects that everybody does at every uni. And in order to get into honours, you have to kind of rank high and get pretty high marks in order to guarantee a spot into an honours year. So for our uni, we kept getting told you have to get minimum 75% or above in all your coursework subjects in order to feel like you're safe in terms of getting into honours. From my experience, I did get into honours. My grades weren't that crazy. I probably hovered around that kind of 75 to 80 mark most of the time throughout my course. And that was enough to get into honours at my university, but I know it's sometimes more competitive at other universities. There's less spaces. So I think the whole time we were moving through the course, we were told that the undergrad experience is mainly just to guarantee and like sharpen your skills to able to get into honours. And when you get into honours, that's when your actual academic kind of career and your professionalism starts to actually kick off. So I know it sounds a bit brutal, but I actually did have one tutor who said undergraduate psychology and pretty much most undergraduate degrees in general are pretty much just ways that unis earn money. They pretty much get hundreds and hundreds of students to come and do undergrads because they've just graduated high school or transitioning careers or something like that. And the undergrad, especially the undergrad psychology degree, is very focused on the main priority for you is to get good marks, not necessarily to learn skills. And that's a problem that I'll talk about a bit later, but that's a problem that I really had with the undergrad experience, this focus on theory over skills. And the thinking behind that is that when you're in your undergrad, you learn theory, and when you're in your honours and master's level, that's when you actually start to learn the skills to be able to work with people and be an effective kind of psychology professional. And I do understand that and I appreciate that and I think that's fine, but as someone who's very orientated towards wanting to learn skills and become like a competent human being who can actually support themselves, that annoyed me a lot throughout the undergraduate degree. So if anyone's starting a psychology degree to learn how to work with people, I would say that's not probably the best way to do that. You're going to be spending more time reading and writing than actually doing any sort of work with people. So yeah, another thing that the culture of the degree that I observed is that there was kind of two pathways that students were kind of funneled into throughout the degree. Not necessarily for any negative reasons, just because this is just how it works, but you could tell that the tutors put a lot of pressure into the students into deciding what type of psychologist do you want to be. Do you want to become an academic? Do you want to, go do your PhD and teach and do all that sort of stuff? Or do you want to become a therapist and a clinician? And then you could tell the students kind of had this weird pressure, including myself, to be like, all right, which camp do I belong in? Which students do I talk to who also belong in that camp? And which teachers do I attach myself to in order to learn more about how that kind of, what that kind of divide does? So, or which side of that divide I should be on. So that's when I started to kind of realize that maybe I didn't fit in as much as I thought I would, because the more I went through the course, the less I wanted to become an academic, even though I love theory and I love like the knowledge area of psychology. I find it incredibly fascinating, and I do a lot of reading even in my spare time about, how humans work, how behavior works, how the mind works, how we all interact with each other. So that'll always be something I'm interested in, but the idea of becoming an academic became less and less attractive the more I moved through the degree. And what I mean by that is that when you study undergrad, all your tutors are either academics themselves or working their way up to become academics, pretty much. So a lot of them are doing their PhD, a lot of them have just done their PhD, or they may be working on their masters, and the culture that they create from the top down really influenced my decision on academia in a negative way, I would say. I think this isn't just my opinion. You can see this kind of all over higher education spaces, and watching YouTubers who kind of leave academia explaining the reasons why. I think the main thing I got was everybody who was an academic, unless they really loved teaching and they felt like their position was valued to the university, they just said it was extremely difficult as a lifestyle, as just a job, as a way to make money and just survive. Just constant pressure to write papers, constant pressure to publish, constant pressure to spend more time doing research that they didn't really necessarily were passionate about, just in order to earn grants and earn money from the university in order to do that research. And I think you could tell a lot of tutors were jaded by the experience and weren't necessarily the biggest advocates for students kind of moving into that direction. And in saying that, I did go to uni with some students who, as day one, orientation day, they were like, I want to become an academic, I want to do my PhD, and they probably will do that and have a great time, and that's fine. But for me and my personality, I was really put off by that experience. So there's that side of things, and then there's the clinical side of things. So the people who enter university and go, look, I just want to help people, I just want to work with people, I'm becoming a psychologist because I just want to I want to be a therapist, I want to work with kind of different people from different backgrounds. Maybe a lot of the people that I studied with had a very specific area that they wanted to work with, which is awesome. Those are the people who go on and do amazing work with those groups of people, and I really love that. But for me, I kind of struggled to figure out whether I wanted to become a therapist. And I think the more I went through the degree and the more experience I got working with people both through uni and outside of uni, I was like, I'm not sure if this job is totally for me. But I think that's kind of a topic for another video. I don't think I'm going to get into that too much here. One of the interesting things I learned whilst I was doing my undergrad, and it wasn't necessarily through doing my undergrad, but it was through getting some great opportunities to work with psychologists outside of uni and to meet and talk to psychologists who were my tutors in uni was something that I think is not talked about as much in other videos, or something that people need to think about when they want to go into psychology, is the emotional energy it takes to become a psychologist. I think a lot of people get wrapped up in the idea of helping people and kind of having that like kind of saintly attitude of, you know, I don't care about money, I just want to kind of do good work and help people. And I know there's lots of psychologists that do that, but I think one thing that I did learn from talking to psychologists is that the emotional toll of speaking to people for hours every single day about the most emotionally distressing things is weighs a toll on you. And I had one tutor who summed it up very succinctly, and I know it's a very simple thing that he said, but it really opened my eyes. He said, nobody goes to talk to a psychologist because they're having a good day, or because they're in a good mood, or in a good mental health space. And I know that seems obvious, but I think for me and a lot of other people, I think we have this subconscious bias that if we become a therapist and a psychologist, it's going to be a bit, our clients are going to be nice and easy to deal with, easy to talk to, that it's just going to be like talking to a friend. But in reality, being a psychologist means you're working with the kind of area of the population that needs the most help, and those people are sometimes not the most pleasant people to be around or work with. And I think me realizing that made me think, even though it feels a bit selfish, like I'm not sure if I'm the best person to do that. Another thing that I think is interesting about studying psychology is that I definitely went into it, and I think a lot of people go into it to learn more about themselves and how their own mental health works. And kind of, you can tell in a class there's people who are definitely there to help others, but I think 90% of people who study psychology, including myself definitely, are there to learn more about themselves and learn how to kind of like fix and heal themselves, even though it's a bit corny. And one of the things that I learned throughout my undergraduate degree, that although psychology is a wonderful resource and it is definitely something that people need to know more about and need to be more educated about, I am not sure if psychology is the kind of one-size-fits-all thing for a lot of people. I'm not sure if every single person would benefit from going to therapy and talking to someone. And I think the more I learned about kind of the science behind psychology and the science behind therapy, the more you realize that maybe it's not as effective or as kind of bulletproof as society kind of holds it up to be. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I think society kind of puts a weird pressure on psychology to kind of fix all of our problems and to kind of explain rationally why we do things and why we act the way we do. And I think the more I learnt about it, and as I went through my degree, the more I realized that mental health is kind of expressed and experienced by people and helped by people and goes up and goes down for 1,000 different reasons that can't always be pinned down to a neat psychological concept, if that makes sense. So I think the more I went through my degree, the less I kind of started to believe in the impact of individual therapy and the impact of, you know, becoming a therapist and thinking that I'm going to fix everybody. I think I eventually realized that mental health is affected by so many different things and can be altered by so many different things. And I think I'm not sure if I have the confidence to say what I do, I deserve to be paid a lot of money in order to quote unquote heal and help people, when I don't really believe in the process that much anymore. So, sorry, I know it's a bit of a rant, but I'll move on. Another thing that I experienced during my undergrad psychology degree that I don't really, I haven't really seen from any other YouTube videos, or haven't really heard from that many people, but I definitely felt it for me, is just feeling of not really fitting in. I think psychology is very heavily dominated by like women, and I think that's totally fine and amazing, but if I'm being honest, I feel like I didn't really fit in, or there wasn't really a space for me to kind of there wasn't really a space where I felt like, yeah, I could see myself being here, or I could kind of connect with other people. And again, this is totally just my experience. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. I just kind of view it or imagine it in the same way that I've heard of like women who study engineering and find it very difficult to fit in because they're just surrounded by kind of nerdy dudes. I kind of felt the same way, but on the opposite end, where as a guy, I kind of felt a bit out of place in classes where oftentimes I would be the only guy, and this was both in uni and outside of uni. So when I would get the experience to work in different places and volunteer in different places, I noticed that often I was one of, if not the only man in the environment, and I struggled to put into words why that kind of why I didn't really like that specifically, but I think it's important to be around people that you think you fit in with and people that you want to kind of be friends with. And I made some amazing friends studying psychology, but if I'm being real, I didn't really feel like I kind of had that many peers who I really connected with. But I know that can be for 1,000 different reasons. I'm not just saying it's because I'm a guy and most people who study psychology are women. That would be stupid. I think it's kind of 1,000 different factors, and that's just one big one, maybe. But that's something I definitely experienced. I think if you're a guy watching this thinking about studying psychology, I would just have a think about if that's something that you can deal with. I know a lot of guys can, and it's fine. But for me, I really struggled to kind of connect with others and make friends because I felt like I just had different interests and kind of a different perspective than a lot of the people there. And that's mainly why I'm also recording this video, because I think that isn't really talked about or explored in when people think about deciding stuff. So yeah. Alright, this video is waffling on, but I've got a few more points to go into. Another thing that I observed during my undergrad is the idea that psychology, I think, is becoming a bit more elitist as time goes on, and the experience of students and psychologists who actually graduate is becoming... What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say the people who are becoming psychologists, in Australia at least, are increasingly becoming the same type of person. And what I mean by that, and again, this isn't just my opinion, this is the opinion of I had a boss who was a psychologist herself, and she was in charge of hiring new psychologists, and she talked a lot about how people who graduate the full 6-year program have obviously an enormous privilege to be able to do that, and are often not the best or most down-to-earth or diverse group of people. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people who can afford to study for 6 years with very little kind of pay and do placements and unpaid work and stuff like that often get to the end of that program and don't really have that much life experience outside of studying. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but I think that psychology is just the fact that it's a protected title means that only a very small select group of people can become a psychologist. And I think that group of people is becoming less and less diverse as time goes on. And I think it's another reason why in Australia it's very difficult to see a psychologist. And if you go on any website of any kind of psychology practice, you kind of see the same type of person in kind of most cases. There's not much different perspectives. Everybody's kind of a bit of a cookie cutter version of themselves. And I think that's because of how the program is set up. And I think that's something that kind of annoyed me as time went on when I was studying psychology. I just didn't see myself as one of these people graduating at the end of the 6-year program and kind of fitting in or being one of those people, I guess. The last thing I'll kind of talk about, and the thing that I think would be valuable to other people, is that there are lots of other options if you want to study psychology. If you want to work with people and you want to learn the skills to work with people, I think take a really serious have a really serious think about whether psychology is for you. I think I have worked and studied alongside a lot of people doing social work, and I think it's funny that psychology is pinned up as this kind of amazing or kind of high status, high class career, whereas social workers do the exact same thing. They gain way more skills, they work with way more diverse populations, but yet they're not seen as these it's not as high status to become a social worker than it is a psychologist. But I think that's silly because psychologists are social workers in the same way that teachers are social workers and nurses are social workers. I think people get so caught up on the kind of title of becoming a psychologist that it blinds them to how kind of maybe mediocre the studying process is to become one. Again, this is just my opinion. So I think there's lots of other options if you want to work with people and if you want to work in the mental health space than spending 6 years studying for no pay. So I'll just say that. So this video has gone for far too long, but I'll just finish it off now. I hope this kind of sheds some light into kind of not only the experience of studying psychology, but some of the interesting things that I observed about it. I definitely don't regret it. I want to make that very clear. I really like studying. I really loved learning new things, and I'll always have my psychology knowledge moving into other areas of my life, and I think that is truly valuable. I had one tutor who said, after you finish your degree, whether you go on to become a psychologist or not, you are going to be burdened with psychological knowledge that you have more of compared to other people. So you need to kind of put that into place, and you need to be responsible with that knowledge going forward. And I really love that. If this is just some of the things that I wish someone would have talked to me about before I started, but I hope you found maybe some value out of what I've been talking about. So I'll stop it here, but thanks for listening, and see you later.